In July of 1861, a gentleman by the name of Wilmer McLean lived on a farm outside of modern-day Manassas, Virginia, in the northern part of the state. That year, the first major battle of the Civil War took place around his farm. A stray cannonball even blew up the summer kitchen. When the battle was over, Mr. McLean decided, all right, I've had enough of this. So he packed up his family and he moved here to this house in a quiet community of Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. And who would have thunk it that 4 years later, the commanding generals of the Union and Confederate forces, Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee, would sign the surrender ending the Civil War. Mr. McLean could rightly brag that the war started at his house and ended at his house. Morning. Today's adventure takes us to Appomattox Courthouse National Park in Appomattox, Virginia. This is the place where the Great American Civil War came to an end on April 9th, 1865. We're going to see the original buildings as well as the place where Lee finally surrendered to Grant. So come along. If you're not careful, you just might learn something. This building is a reproduction of the original Appomattox Courthouse building. The original courthouse burned in 1892, and it was not until the early 1960s that a reproduction building was constructed. The exterior of the building is historically accurate to what the original courthouse looked like. However, the interior now serves as the Park Visitor Center. This building is the Clover Hill Tavern. It was first built in 1819 and was the only inn, restaurant, and bar in town, and it was actually the very first building of what would become Appomattox Courthouse. This is one of two buildings used by the Federal Army. After the surrender had been signed on April 9th, Union soldiers came in here with a bunch of printing presses and started printing out parole documents for all the Confederate soldiers. They produced more than 30,000 of these documents in just a matter of days. These are the printing presses that were used to produce the parole documents for each of the Confederate soldiers. You can see some samples of what the documents look like hanging on the clothesline here. It looks like they printed off 3 or 4 parole docs on a single sheet of paper, which I guess would speed up the process a little. Also in the Clover Hill Tavern, we have some various relics and exhibits from the war. An old belt, canteen, saber, bayonet, a badly damaged saber, and it looks like a Hall of Fame up here for various soldiers who were present here on that day. This brick building served as the kitchen for the tavern, where all the food was prepared. Adjacent to it is another set of slave quarters, which today is being used as restrooms. Here's something wrong with that. I'm sorry. These four corners of bricks are the site of the original county jail for Appomattox County. That building was never rebuilt. Now this building is the county jail for Appomattox Courthouse that was in operation about the time of the late 1860s when everything transpired here. This building, we're going to go inside here in a minute. This is a room on the main floor of the 1867 jail. I guess this is where the jailer slept and everything else. The other room on the main floor of the 1867 county jail. Note the old leg shackles and handcuffs hanging on the wall there underneath that rifle. Now we are on the second floor of the old jail. This is where the bad guys would have been kept. You see the heavy iron bars on the windows and the cell door here. There's a much heavier wooden door on the outside of this cell door. And here is one of the heavy wooden doors that was mentioned previously. Across from that cell, we have yet another cell. This one doesn't seem to be quite as furnished as the first one. I don't know if that made a difference, or maybe they just haven't put in reproduction furniture. Who knows? You see the heavy iron ring there on the floor where a prisoner could be shackled to. See, the rafters are heavy wooden boards about 3 inches thick and spaced about 4 or 5 inches apart. I guess that would deter any prisoners from trying to tear through the ceiling and make an escape through the attic. Looks like it goes to another floor here, but that's locked and closed off. You'll note that the main floors in the jail where the people lived had fireplaces. The upstairs where the cells were did not. So I imagine in the wintertime upstairs it got mighty cold, and it got mighty hot in the summer too. This is the original stage road. The McLean house sat right in front of it. This was the main drag back in the day. just down the street from the old courthouse. This yellowish building here on the left was the general store for the town of Appomattox. It's not open, but you can look at the outside. Here's another view of the general store. It's not open to the public. This is the back side of the McLean house. Now this building sits behind the McLean house. This is the summer kitchen. These old houses, it was not uncommon to have both a winter kitchen and a summer kitchen. The winter kitchen would be within the main house, typically in the basement, so the house could take advantage of the heat generated by the fireplace over which all the cooking was done back then. Now in the summertime, when the excess heat in the house was not desirable, they would move all the cooking to a separate building outside of the house where they could keep the fire going all the time and not overheat the main residence. So this is the summer kitchen. This is the interior of the summer kitchen, where all the food was cooked and prepared during the summer months. They could keep a fire going out here without overheating the main house. Adjacent to the summer kitchen, outside the back of the McLean house, is the slave quarters. This is where the slaves, which unfortunately were a thing back then, this is where they lived. This is a look inside one of the rooms of the slave quarters. Not exactly first-class accommodations. This is the other room of the slave quarters, along with a set of stairs that goes to the upper floor. Again, not exactly the best place in the world to live, but at least they had a solid floor and they had heat. And how could we forget the facilities? I don't know if this was exclusive use by the slaves or it served the whole house. Can't really tell. It doesn't say. This is a bedroom on the main floor of the McLean house. And those two rooms, I guess, are the only ones you're allowed to see in here. The stairway to the upper level is blocked off, so can't go up there and show anything. As to the rest of the house farther back. And this is the room where the American Civil War came to an end. General Robert E. Lee of the Confederates sat at the left table here with the marble top. Union General Ulysses S. Grant sat over here at the smaller wooden table with the wooden legs. Lee had dressed in his best uniform, being the gentleman that he was, to surrender to Grant. Grant, however, had just come in from the field and he was wearing his day-to-day uniform. He had some mud on his boots and the pant legs, and he apologized to Lee for that. The two gentlemen talked for a while, and then Lee finally brought up the subject of the surrender. Grant sat and wrote 2 pages of the terms of surrender, which were very generous. If the Confederate soldiers would swear allegiance to the Union and stack their arms, they could go home. If they owned a horse, they could take the horse with them. Additionally, officers were allowed to keep their sidearms. Lee read the document, made one change where he saw that a word had been omitted, apparently, signed it, returned it to Grant. The gentlemen shook hands, and that was the end of the war. The rest of the surrender took place on April 12th, where the soldiers actually came and stacked their arms. Lee gave them a speech that said he had done the best he could for them, assured them if you were as good a citizen as you were a soldier, you will do well. And with that, the men headed home. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little visit to Appomattox Courthouse. Hope you enjoyed watching the video just as much as I enjoyed making it. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and we'll see you on the next adventure. This is the Tactical Panda signing off.